My guest today found herself exhausted from constantly traveling with her husband, who was a Major League Baseball coach. The jet lag was brutal, but eventually she realized that spiritual jet lag was actually a greater problem. To explain, I'm joined by author and podcaster Billie Jauss. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you have lived an unusual life. A lot of traveling, a lot of plane rides, a lot of different time zones. Tell me what life was like with your husband and 3 boys.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's been, we've been in professional baseball for 36 years now. So we started out without kids, had kids through it, moved all over. We've lived in 15 different cities and towns in the U.S., the Dominican Republic, and Venezuela. So we've been in a lot of different areas, all with baseball. We've been very blessed to be able to do that. But raising kids in baseball is a hard life, and trying to keep up with all the schedules and all the things has been challenging at times, but such a blessing because we look at baseball as our mission field. This is where God's put us, and this is where we're going to serve Him.
Oh, I love that. And I think a lot of people probably think it's a lot more glamorous than it actually is. But tell me about why you said spiritual jet lag was the bigger problem.
Yeah, I found myself at a time that I was really discouraged. I was full of doubt. I kept feeling like I was in a place that God didn't desire me to be mentally. And I looked at it in that comparison of jet lag. You know, when you land in a place and you've been on the plane all night, a red eye, and you wake up and you're in a fog and you hear the city you're in and you're like, why am I in this city? There's that, a little bit of lethargy. I can't get the word. You're lethargic. You're confused a little bit. And that's the way we find ourselves when we are in a place spiritually that God doesn't desire us to be, where we're full of doubt, where we have fears, where we're just finding ourselves in a place that's a little foggy and a little distant from where God is.
I know a lot of people can relate to that. Busyness can do that. So you thought, if I simplify things, it's going to make it all better. But it actually didn't.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah, I went through, actually my first book was Making Room, Doing Less So God Can Do More. And I thought, I'm going to get my schedule under control. This was after my kids were going off to college and I had time on my hands. And I'm like, I'm going to get the busyness of life settled down. But I started stuffing my schedule. I started doing all these things. And I thought, if I can simplify my life and take out that busyness, those external distractions, then I'm going to be good. I'm going to have time to spend with God, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to listen to Him wholeheartedly. And I found myself not doing that. And I was confused. It was that time of confusion, that spiritual jet lag in that moment that I knew wasn't coming from the external distractions, but was more so coming from the internal distractions that I was experiencing.
Yeah, and I like what you say. So you wrote about this in your book, Distraction Detox. This is your second book. And I think you realized you were keeping God at a distance. And I don't think that's unusual. I think sometimes we are busy or we get busy even doing things for God so that we don't actually have to talk to God.
Yeah.
So what was the barriers? What was in the way?
Yeah, when I started thinking about what I was thinking about, that scared me. And in that moment of listing, I'm a list maker. So I was listing all those things that I was thinking about that was negative thoughts. What are those negative? I called them emotional toxins because they're poison to us. When we start finding ourselves in such a negative place, those are toxins. And when I made that list, I realized I was my biggest bully. There is no one on earth that I would speak to the way I speak to myself. And there's no one on earth that speaks to me that way. Not that I haven't had people speak negatively to me or say hurtful things, but the thoughts that I was having of I'm not good enough. How can God love me? How can God use me when I'm a terrible human? I'm a bad wife. I'm a bad mom. All those things, I realized I was my biggest bully and I needed to take control of that.
Yeah, and that's really a process. It's not like one day you just say, and I have to say, like, speaking negatively to yourself is, I think, common to humankind. Yeah. Seems to be even worse with women because there's such high expectations on how we look and how we're a mom. And maybe men feel it the same, but I just feel like women sometimes are even harder on ourselves. What was the process as you started to go, okay, I need to detox from this negativity about myself?
Yeah, I really sat down, and once I had that list, and it terrified me that that was actually the way that I was thinking about myself and talking to myself, that's when I knew I had to dig into them. Why do I think this way? And when I first started the process for myself, because I never write a book that I have not gone through this process, when I started it for myself, because it terrified me when I looked at some of the things I was thinking about myself, I wanted to know why. I ask a lot of questions. Even when I hear people's stories, I ask a lot of questions. So I started digging into, why am I thinking this? So that's when I went into evaluating those toxins. Where did they come from? Sometimes I could dig up that someone said something to me, or I had had this experience and I started believing that way. Some were deeper than that. And, you know, I needed to really dig them up. And I always say, if they're too deep to take care of yourself, getting therapy, going to a counselor is so important, because sometimes we can't handle all of these emotions on our own. But once I started evaluating the toxins and realizing where they were based, how they were making me feel. Like, one of the chapters in the book is feeling the feels. Like, I needed to know how they made me feel. What was I getting out of them? Because you always, if you're holding on to something so tightly, you're benefiting from it in one way or another. And so when I went through that and I realized all of it, I didn't want to stay there. And like you said earlier, these are very common things to think negative thoughts. What I did was I started this process in, how am I going to take care of these thoughts immediately when they come in my mind, so that they don't spiral down to where God never intended me to be. And so that's where I started with determining those distractions and then evaluating them.
Yeah, and I think I want to mention one of the thoughts that you struggle with, because I think this is very common. I'm sure it's so common in the baseball world, but I think in every world, this imposter syndrome idea, like, at some point people are going to realize I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not one of them, I don't fit. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny, because when I first started being a television producer, I had that. And then I saw an actor, like a famous actor, be interviewed and saying the same things. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is how everybody feels. Yeah. We all feel like we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. And that isn't just in positions like yours or in baseball. It's as a mom. Sometimes we look up and we go, oh my gosh, somebody's going to come and tell me I'm a terrible mother. Somebody's going to tell me I should never have been a mom. You know, whatever it is that we're struggling with, imposter syndrome is basically just, we're walking out a walk that we're not supposed to be walking out. And that's not true, because if we're walking out a walk that God's called us into, He wants us to be there. And even if someone says something negative to you, it doesn't mean that it's all a lie and it's all false. It just means that that one person is having an issue with it. And if we're truly walking where God is asking us to walk, we can't be imposters in that, because we've been given that calling by Him.
And not only that, but there's an aspect of following God where He likes to put you in over your head.
Yes.
The whole point of it is, as soon as we feel like we know what we're doing, we're not depending on Him anymore. And then He's starting to scheme, okay, how can I get her back into a position, him or her, where they feel like they don't know what they're doing, and they're going to be crying out to me for my strength, my power, my wisdom, everything that they need, right? Yeah, I mean, is that not how He is?
Absolutely. God's going to push us to the edge of our comfort zone, which my edge is here, and He pushes me here. So He pushes me much farther, and I think He pushes all of us much farther. And I didn't start writing until my children were out of the home. And my first comment was, Lord, how can I write? When I felt that the Lord was putting writing on my heart, He was really pushing me in that direction. I was like, how can I write? I grew up in a town that the education wasn't that great. My accent was very strong and harsh. I don't know that I can write the words that you want me to write. And the Lord kept pushing me farther and farther. And the thing was that He pushed me, but I also took that next one step that He was calling me into. And that's when, within this distraction detox, when I started terminating those toxins. And in the book, I talk about deceptions versus truth. What's the lie? What's the deception? And then what does God's truth tell us about that deception? And when I started living each day with the thought of the truth, even when that deception came up, I would grab a hold of it right away, and not just take hold of it, but release it, because I can move forward in the truth of what God was telling me.
You know, you go through all the toxins that we have to get rid of, but then you say we need a spiritual health plan. So tell me about that.
The spiritual health plan is outlining a plan for how you're going to tackle these negative thoughts. We go through that, determining the toxin, evaluating the toxin, and terminating it. How are you going to do this one by one? How are you going to walk out this spiritual health plan? Because if we're not spiritually healthy, we're not healthy at all. We really can. It can take a toll on our physical health. It can take a toll on our emotional health. It can take a toll on our relationships, in our connections with others. And in that spiritual health plan, it's just walking through the steps of what are we going to do next? You know, God loves us walking in the small steps with Him. He rejoices in the small steps that we take. So making a plan, because I believe that if we're trying to accomplish something and we just have a wall that we're throwing stuff at, oh, I'm going to try to do that, we never truly hit that target, because we need a target to be able to hit. And that's what the spiritual health plan is. It's a target. What is it that we're working on with God, and where are we going in that?
And I love what you say too. It's not like, hey, God, I'm making this plan.
No.
Please bless it.
No.
There's a difference, right?
No.
This is like, what is your plan?
That's it. Because as we release these toxins, we're able to hear God better. We're able to hear where it is He desires us to go. We're able to trust Him more, because we're releasing these toxins. We're relying on His word. So we're able to hear what He says, trust in where He's calling us, and go where He's asking us to go.
So good. You know, this is a lot of hard soul work that a lot of us will do anything rather than do, right, to avoid it. You end the book with, I can't, you can, and I am here. So what is that?
Yeah, I'm a very visual person. And when I was going through this, I knew that I had to submit to God in every step of everything I did. And so I went through this, God, I can't do it, but I know that you can. And here I am, submitting to where it is that He desires us to be in God's best, not always our best. We may think that we have a goal and we want to hit that target, but God goes, no, I'm going to take you in this direction. I thought when my kids were out of the house, I'd be a speaker and I'd be on some speaking circuit, and because I'd been speaking for years. And God's like, no, you're going to write. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to write. So He took all the speaking away to take me in the direction of writing. And I began to write. So it's really a submission of, okay, God, you're calling me into this, whatever it may be. It could be motherhood. It could be marriage. It could be a new job, a new place that you're moving to. It could be anything that has changed in our life. And we just have to say, God, I can't do this, but I know you can. And I'm here.
And I love that, because you can't take that trusting posture until you remove all the lies about yourself, about Him, all the things that are creating a barrier and that spiritual jet lag. Such a great process, and it brings you to such a beautiful place. Thank you so much for sharing. People are going to have to get the book to read the rest. Distraction Detox by Billie Jauss.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.